What if enlightenment didn't make your life better, but shattered it beyond recognition? In 1937, a quiet, disciplined civil servant named Gopi Krishna sat down for his daily meditation. Nothing unusual, same posture, same time, same breath. He had done this for 17 years. No drugs, no gurus, no chanting circles, just silence and focus. But on that particular morning, something changed. He heard a sharp, internal snapping, like a thread breaking deep inside his spine. Then came a surge of liquid light, rushing upward and exploding in his skull. In that moment, everything familiar disappeared. His consciousness expanded beyond his body. In his own words, he became a vast circle of awareness, no longer confined to flesh and bone. It sounds like a spiritual dream realized, but it was a nightmare. When Gopi Krishna returned to normal awareness, the suffering began. He couldn't sleep. Food made him physically ill. His emotions were blunted to the point of absence. His body burned as if metal flowed through his veins. For 12 years, he lived in torment, isolated in a condition that few could recognize and none could help. This wasn't peace, it wasn't bliss, it was biological trauma triggered by spiritual force. And the tragedy is, he never asked for it. And he wasn't trying to ascend or chase some divine state. He was just meditating. Today, we live in a culture that's repackaged enlightenment as a lifestyle accessory. It's sold in glossy ads and Instagram videos, serene beaches, confident teachers, radiant light, playlists of high vibration frequencies. You don't have to climb a mountain or confront the shadow self. Just sign up for a retreat, press play on a guided meditation, maybe attend a Kundalini activation with someone who smiles warmly and says you're ready. But behind the soft music and polished mantras lies something darker. These practices, powerful, ancient, and dangerous when misused, have been stripped of their context and sold like over-the-counter supplements. The rituals once protected and passed down with reverence are now broadcast on social media and offered to anyone with Wi-Fi and a credit card. Practices like breathwork, Kundalini yoga, altered state meditations, once reserved for those who had trained for years, are being marketed as instant transformation. But nobody talks about what happens when it goes wrong. When someone panics, dissociates, burns out, or spirals into psychosis, the blame doesn't fall on the method or the guide. It falls on the student. You're told it's resistance, that your ego is dying, that you just need to surrender more. It's a convenient way to deflect responsibility. But what if the student wasn't resisting? What if their body was simply overwhelmed? What if their nervous system was screaming that it couldn't hold the voltage? This isn't a problem of intention. People genuinely want to heal, to grow, to connect with something deeper. But they're being misled into thinking that intention alone is enough, that preparation is optional, that trauma will dissolve with enough sound baths and crystals. But consciousness doesn't work like that. Awakening isn't a vibe, it's a rewiring of your entire system. And if your system isn't ready, what should have been illumination becomes combustion. The energy burns through fragile pathways, and what emerges isn't enlightenment, it's collapse. Ancient traditions knew this. They didn't hand out mantras like candy. They watched students for years. They tested them, grounded them, broke their egos, cleaned out the emotional residue, before ever allowing them near real spiritual tools. Not because they were gatekeepers, because they understood the risk. They saw the nervous system as sacred, not incidental. Your nerves, your breath, your hormones, your psychologies weren't side details. They were the architecture of your ability to hold energy, and if that structure wasn't strong, the light would wreck it. But today, we've divorced spirituality from biology. We've separated mystical experience from the very body that must carry it. And so, when people suffer, they're not supported, they're gaslit. Their symptoms are reframed as signs of progress. Shaking, that's a release. Insomnia, you're just integrating. Anxiety, your ego is resisting. Panic, you're on the verge of a breakthrough. But none of these statements address the truth, that the human system has limits. And when you push beyond them without respect, something breaks. Gopi Krishna wasn't weak or naive. He was consistent, grounded, quiet, but he didn't have guidance. He didn't have context. When his Kundalini surged, it tore through a system that wasn't prepared, and he paid for it with over a decade of suffering. He survived, barely, and spent the rest of his life trying to warn others. But few wanted to hear it, because his story didn't fit the narrative, it didn't sell retreats, it didn't glow. Now, the same dynamic repeats. People are drawn into high-voltage practices without support, and when they destabilize, they're blamed. They're told to keep going, to push harder, to stay on the path. But the truth is, their body may be saying stop, slow down, integrate, breathe, and they have the right to listen. They have the right to walk away, to demand context, to question the process. That's not resistance, that's discernment. Real spiritual work isn't fast. It's not glamorous. It's slow, deep, and often painfully honest. It requires structure, grounding, time. It doesn't unfold on a weekend. It doesn't happen on command. And when it does begin to rise, truly rise, it demands that your system be ready. Because the forces involved are not symbolic. They're physiological. Lightning isn't a metaphor, it's energy. It courses through your spine, cracks open your perceptions, shatters the limits of your identity. And if the nervous system isn't prepared, that current doesn't illuminate you, it burns you alive. That's why traditional systems waited. That's why students spent years cleaning their bodies, mastering breath, studying philosophy, refining posture. Because awakening wasn't a moment, it was a capacity. And without the capacity, even truth becomes poison. We've lost that understanding. We've traded process for performance, depth for display. We think that spiritual power can be consumed like content, that experience equals evolution, but evolution requires endurance. And most people aren't taught how to endure. When someone breaks down after a spiritual event, panic attacks, disassociation, mental collapse sits not because they're weak, it's because they weren't prepared, and it's not their fault. The system failed them. The teacher failed them. The structure didn't exist. And instead of receiving care, they're shamed, told to surrender, told they're being tested, told their suffering is proof they're ascending. These aren't insights, they're manipulations, and in some cases, they're spiritual abuse. Pain isn't proof of progress. Pain is a signal. If your body is shutting down, it means something's wrong. If your emotions vanish, your sleep disappears. Your thoughts scattered. It's not a breakthrough, it's a system overwhelmed. And what it needs is not more practice, but more care, more grounding, more regulation, because your biology doesn't lie. Your body doesn't care how sincere you are. It only cares whether it feels safe. Awakening should not be an accident. It should not be a gamble. It should be a process of building capacity physically, emotionally, mentally. Not everyone is ready. Not everyone should rush. That's not elitism. It's wisdom. Because once you open the door, you can't close it again. And if you're not prepared, what you meet on the other side may not be bliss. It may be the end of everything you thought you were. This is not a condemnation of spiritual growth. It's a call for responsibility. Because real awakening isn't about chasing light. It's about holding truth, all of it. Even the parts that hurt, even the parts that say, this is too much. We've mistaken collapse for cleansing, chaos for transformation, trauma for transcendence. And in doing so, we've lost touch with the very wisdom that once protected us. The path is still here, but it's slow, it's humble, it's rooted. And if you're not willing to walk it one step at a time, you may not be ready. And that's not failure, that's discernment. Because the point of the journey isn't to explode into the divine, it's to become strong enough to hold it. And that kind of strength can't be bought. It has to be built, quietly, patiently, honestly, until the vessel is ready. And when it is, the light will come, not as a fire that burns you down, but as a power you were built to carry. We've become obsessed with intensity. In modern spiritual culture, quiet progress is overlooked, discarded even, while dramatic experiences are idolized. A person who sits silently for years in daily meditation is invisible, but someone who claims a spontaneous Kundalini awakening over the weekend is suddenly elevated as enlightened. This distortion has created a spiritual hierarchy built not on depth or consistency, but on spectacle. Drama is not depth. It's often just nervous system cloaked in spiritual language. And when we chase those highs, those shudders, those tears, those flashes of insight, we lose sight of what the work was meant to be. The quiet, grounded cultivation of a stable vessel that can actually hold the consciousness we're so eager to call in. But there's a darker thread woven into this pattern, one that benefits from your instability. The teachers who build their reputations on sudden transformations often depend on keeping you in a cycle of seeking. If you're always broken open, always unsure, always needing the next breakthrough, then you're always in need of their help. Another session, another course, another activation. And when you inevitably crash, when your body gives out or your mind unravels, it's never the method that failed. It's always you. You didn't surrender enough. You weren't aligned. You weren't ready. But the truth is, you should never have been pushed that far, that fast. Awakening is not supposed to be explosive. It's often quiet, subtle, even mundane. It brings with it a deep discomfort, not fireworks. It asks you to look at the unedited parts of yourself, the shadow, the grief, the fear, and not transcend them but integrate them, slowly and truthfully. There are no peak moments to share, no wild testimonies. Just the gradual unfolding of clarity. But clarity doesn't sell. It doesn't go viral. And so the marketplace packages spectacle and sells it as transcendence. If your path has been long and quiet, if your growth doesn't fit into clean milestones or glowing testimonials, that doesn't mean you're behind. It probably means you're doing it right. Because consciousness doesn't need drama to expand, it needs space. Space to land, space to breathe, space to be received by a nervous system that isn't constantly being pushed to its edge. What we need now aren't more performers. We need practitioners, people who understand that true transformation is often invisible, that it shows up not in visions but in how we treat our pain, how we stay present with our discomfort, how we show up when there is no audience. Intensity feels powerful. It convinces us that something important must be happening. Your body is shaking, you're crying, you're seeing light. But not every fire is sacred. Some fires just burn. And too often, Modern spirituality teaches people to mistake emotional overwhelm for spiritual growth. Crying in a circle isn't always healing. Screaming during breathwork isn't always release. Visions during ceremonies aren't always evidence of insight. Sometimes they're just symptoms of nervous system overload, trauma responses to a system pushed beyond its limits without proper containment, without grounding, without support. Yet this collapse is rebranded as awakening. Participants are praised for their breakdowns, for going deeper, for opening, but opening isn't always safe. In fact, opening without containment is often the fastest way to re-traumatize the body. The teachers become known for how intense their workshops are, and the students come to believe that intensity equals progress. And so we've replaced healing with its performance, transformation with spectacle. Gopi Krishna's experience wasn't a marketing campaign, it was agony. His body couldn't handle the energy that surged through it. He didn't glorify what happened to him, he shared it as a warning. But today, his kind of story would be polished into content, a clip, a quote, a before and after reel sold to promote the very kind of reckless spiritual experimentation that nearly destroyed him. Real transformation often looks like nothing. It's in the way you catch your breath when you would have once panicked, the way you soften into a moment of discomfort rather than flinching from it. But that doesn't make good content, so it's discarded. In its place, we're given an endless cycle of intense highs, all engineered to keep us chasing something that can never be captured through force. This spiritual chase damages the body. It teaches the nervous system that rest is wrong, that stimulation is sacred, but healing only happens in safety. Growth only takes root in stillness. And so we create damage in the name of evolution. Not always intentionally. Many teachers believe in what they're offering. They believe collapse leads to breakthrough because that's what they were taught. But belief is not enough. Without training, without ethics, without trauma awareness, they become facilitators of harm. If your practice keeps leaving you splintered, it's not awakening, it's wounding. If your teacher keeps pushing intensity but never teaches you how to stabilize, they're not guiding you, they're provoking you. Your progress is not measured by how extreme your experiences are. It's measured by how integrated your presence becomes. Chasing intensity is just another form of escape, and you don't need to be torn apart to transform. The most sacred work happens in the spaces you've been taught to ignore. Quiet mornings, still breath, soft hearts. When your nervous system finally remembers what safety feels like, that is real power. Not the show, not the storm. Real spiritual practice is often boring, not because it's meaningless, but because it's honest. It's repetitive, it's slow. It doesn't look like visions or downloads. It looks like consistency. It looks like sitting with yourself through discomfort without fleeing. It looks like choosing truth over thrill. We've been taught that transcendence is the goal, that we're supposed to rise above our bodies, our minds, our pain. But what if the real path is not up but in? What if it's not about escaping, but arriving? You can't outrun your humanity and expect to meet divinity. You have to bring them both with you. Gopi Krishna didn't suffer because he was unworthy or unspiritual. He suffered because he was unprepared. His body wasn't ready to hold the current that rushed through it, and no one told him it could be dangerous. He was left to survive it alone. That same story is playing out again and again today. Thousands of people are being pushed into altered states their systems can't support, and when they collapse, they're blamed for not being spiritual enough. They're told to surrender harder, but what they need is care. What they need is consent. Consent is missing from most modern spiritual spaces. Energetic consent, emotional consent. Were you ready for what came through you? Did you agree to this timing? Did you feel safe? Or were you exposed to something too big too soon under the illusion of growth? If it didn't happen on your terms, it wasn't awakening, it was violation. So we need to start asking better questions. Not how do I awaken faster, but what part of me still needs healing before expansion is safe? Not how do I reach higher frequencies, but can my nervous system hold more truth without breaking? These are the questions that protect your sovereignty. You are not a machine to be upgraded. You are not here to be cracked open by force. You are a layered, sensitive, powerful being, and you expand best when you're ready, not when you're pushed. We need to stop mistaking spiritual crisis for spiritual success. People in collapse are not evidence of progress. They are signs that the system failed them. And if you've been through something like this, if you've been fractured by a force that came too fast, you are not weak. You are not failing. You are not resisting. You are reacting the way any living system does when it's overwhelmed. You have a right to slow down. You have a right to create boundaries with your own process. That's not regression, that's wisdom. You don't owe anyone your breakdown just because they told you it was part of the path. You don't owe your consent to teachers who don't respect your readiness. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to walk at a pace that honors your system, your timing, your truth. The spiritual world is full of voices pushing you forward, but the voice you need most is the one that says, it's okay to stop, to rest, to listen. If no one has told you yet, you are not behind, you are not broken, and your quiet, gentle process is sacred. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to perform anything. You are allowed to unfold in silence. That is your path. That is your power. Let this be a reminder. Awakening is not the end goal. It's a deep reshaping, a steady refinement. And if you truly want to hold more consciousness, you have to begin by tending to what's fragile, unresolved, or weary inside you. Light doesn't just illuminate, it reveals, it exposes every crack in your foundation. That's why the old traditions were so cautious. They didn't withhold the teachings, they protected them. They protected you. You don't pour gold into a broken bowl. You mend the vessel first, you strengthen it slowly, and only then do you allow the current to move through. Contrast that with today's spiritual landscape fast-track initiations. Breathwork is entertainment, peak experiences sold like consumer goods. We've made awakening disposable, and then we wonder why people collapse. If this has been your path, if awakening came like a storm and left you lost, you are not broken. You are someone who has given too much, too soon. That doesn't make you less spiritual. It means you need care, not more light, more structure, more support, more permission to breathe. You don't need another breakthrough. You need to feel safe again. And from that safety, something far deeper will emerge, not as a performance, but as presence. Not as a flash of power, but as the quiet strength of someone who no longer needs to chase anything to feel whole. That's the truth no one can sell, and that's why it matters most.